The road ahead for crude. In light of these developments, I'm now joined by Miswin Mahesh, energy analyst at Barclays from London. Thank you very much for joining us here on The Big Picture. Help us understand the developments that we've taken place today. Ali Al-Naimi had already indicated that it was time for him to retire, with King Salman's son, Deputy Crown Prince Mohammed, pretty much running the show now. Do you think there would have been perhaps a clash of ideas at the oil ministry, and that in some way may have facilitated the exit of the veteran oil minister?
Yeah, I think, as you've said, Ali Al-Naimi is 81 years old now. He's been saying for a while that he wants to retire. In fact, in 2010, there were sort of early indications that were given to the king back then that he wanted to retire. But then the monarch really wanted Al-Naimi to be in place, because he was the architect of sort of unifying OPEC over the last 20 years. He's had such a good name within the country as well as outside. So in that aspect, Al-Naimi's done a great job, and what we saw over the weekend in terms of the replacement is just an ongoing process by the new king and his associates to bring change into the country, and also a fact that Al-Naimi now has to retire. So in terms of how we at Barclays are seeing this development, we think in the medium term it does open the doors for Saudi oil policy to change, but as of now, they're still on course to follow the same policy that they will if Al-Naimi was in place. So nothing much changes for the very short term. It's the medium term that we need to look for. The other element I'd add is, even in Doha, we did see the mismatch sort of come through between Mohammed bin Salman's political objectives and the commercial objectives of Ali Al-Naimi.
Right. Fair enough there, but also help us understand what happens now to the Vision 2030 plan that was outlined about a month ago, because they clearly now want to reduce their dependence on oil. That is something the Deputy Crown Prince has repeatedly emphasized. They're also taking, an unprecedented route, taking Saudi's Aramco public. 5% will be offloaded. What does the kingdom now need to do to achieve the goals that they had laid out for that 2030 plan?
Yeah, so the kingdom's clearly focusing itself away from oil. And as the princess said, by 2020, the price of oil shouldn't actually matter for the kingdom. But the thing is, fundamentally, given how large of a proportion oil is to Saudi Arabia, and the fact that other industries aren't that competitive, if at all, the other industries such as agriculture and mining, as well as other industries, at the moment, they're all profitable because of the subsidies from oil. So the real goal with this 2030 plan has essentially been shifting the focus away. The kingdom will increasingly start focusing on renewables as well. I think solar, as much as they've said the kingdom has a lot of oil, they have a lot of sunshine as well, and they do want to channel some of that solar energy market as well going into the 2030 period. Al-Naimi did mention it in his speech when he did that in Houston a few months ago, that the kingdom is now looking at being an energy supplier to the world, more so than just a pure play oil supplier. And that sort of gets reflected in the new the naming of the ministry as well. It's not the oil ministry now, it's the energy ministry and a ministry of resources in a sense. So that change is being seen. The kingdom knows that even after the Paris COP21 climate change agreement, the world is changing in terms of how fossil fuels are being recognized, whether it be in emerging markets or whether it be in developed markets. One thing I'd add though is Saudi Arabia is not only focused on renewables, they're also trying to focus on how they can reduce emissions from currently burning fossil fuels, because we need to know, as much as they focus on on renewables, they still have one of the largest fossil fuel reserves, and they do need to monetize it. So one of the things that they are focusing on is how can we burn the fuel that we burn right now in gasoline and diesel a lot cleaner. So that's another area that they're focusing on.
Absolutely. Yeah, in fact, Al-Naimi has also mentioned that he wants to now focus on his other job, which is where in the capacity of the chairman of the Science and Technology University in Saudi Arabia, which is, of course, looking at a post-hydrocarbon world. But also tell us, a little bit about this, about the fact that Saudi and Iran have, of course, been at loggerheads over a freeze and output, with Saudi saying that it will freeze only if Iran does. Now, Iran, on the other hand, has been saying that it does not want to impose sanctions on itself now that the Western sanctions have been lifted. It is clearly an undeclared war now between the two countries. Where do you think this situation is headed? And should we be equating, any possible an outcome which is different just because we have now a change of guard in the oil ministry?
Yeah, so a few things here. One, in terms of the oil market freeze, etc. Iran's now coming out and saying that they will join once their output is ramped up, right? So give them another 6 to 12 months. Once they get back to 4 million barrels per day of crude oil production, then they might join on the table for a freeze. But that's one angle to look at it. And we still need to know if Saudi Arabia and the rest of the members would be on board, even if we do see such a scenario. So that's one angle. The second thing is the oil market has been balancing. We've had the outage in Canada, as we spoke about earlier, outages in Nigeria, etc. So the work that OPEC should have done in balancing the markets by signing a freeze deal or actually even cutting is actually now being done by all the unplanned outages that we've had, ranging from Colombia, Nigeria, Iraq, as well as the recent one in Canada. So in that sense, one really needs to question whether when we come to June, will a freeze really matter to the market if oil market balances have already started adjusting and the price is moving higher. So there might come a time when they possibly don't even have to discuss a freeze anymore because the markets have naturally balanced. And on your question, does the Saudi change of guard change anything? We don't think so. If anything, I think Mohammed bin Salman's voice was heard the loudest in Doha just a few weeks ago, and that will be reflected with Al Fali as well. And it doesn't look like commercial objectives of market share or prodding demand up will be as important as the political weight that they're currently placing with regards to their rivalry with Iran. They don't want to be seen freezing output when their arch rival in the Middle East is ramping up output.
Thank you very much for joining us there, Miswin, and helping us understand how one should react to this development. Clearly, as you're saying, we shouldn't react too much because nothing may change in the short term. Changes may be expected more in the medium term.